Sultan Barakat is the director of the Global Institute for Strategic Research at Hamad Bin Khalifa University, and he joins me now live from Doha. Thank you so much for being with us on the program. Now, millions around the world are waiting in anticipation to see the results of these diplomatic efforts from the likes of Qatar, Egypt, and the U.S. We're hearing that there might be an extension of at least 2 days. What are you foreseeing happening?
Well, the current 2 days obviously have been agreed, and they're likely to continue without a major hitch to them. The talks, I think, is about a longer ceasefire, which will inevitably involve exchange of men and potentially even soldiers. The until this point, what Hamas have left in terms of hostages are entirely civilians, and mostly women and children. And what they were given in return were also women and children, young men from amongst the Palestinians, but no real high-value prisoners were released, i.e. No one who's active politically or militarily, or even associated with Hamas directly. Until now, the majority of those released from Israeli prisons are linked to the West Bank, and some of them were associated with Fatah, the Palestinian administration, and so on. And that was probably a step taken by Hamas in order to show that it is pretty much a national movement and it is concerned about all prisoners. Now, I think the next stage is going to be a much more focused core discussions around much higher political and military figures who are captured by Israel over the years in return for men who have been captured by Hamas on the 7th of October, and potentially soldiers.
On that point, I want to kind of emphasize on the fact that the negotiations will kind of take a turn when it's in regards to the Israeli military personnel that are currently being held hostage by Hamas. How do you think the negotiations are going to change? What will Hamas ask for moving forward?
Well, if you go back to the 7th of October, the first announcement by Hamas, they've set up two main objectives for their operation. Number one was to stop Israel from invading or breaching on Al-Aqsa Mosque. And to some extent, that has kind of stopped, but there is no real new policy on this. Simply, they're not allowing Israeli settlers into the mosque anymore. And the second was the slogan of all for all, that they wanted the release of all Palestinian prisoners in exchange for all the prisoners that they were holding. They went in with that declared objective that they needed to capture Palestinians in order to be able to exchange them with prisoners. And this is, of course, the experience and if you like, the playbook between Hamas and Israel for the last 20 years. They've never been able to release a single prisoner without an exchange, either with a hostage or maybe a body of a soldier and so on. So their ultimate objective is to release all prisoners held by Israel. And I think this is a promise that was made by the current leader of Hamas, Mr. Sinwar, when he was released in 2011. This is a promise that he made to all the prisoners in Israeli jails. So that is their ultimate objective. Now, whether they'll be able to achieve that, we don't really know, because the position of Israel, although it has changed quite a lot, remains adamant that Israel will not let out quite a large number of Palestinians that they see as a threat for their national security.
Right, in these negotiations, they're crucial moments, not only to push for an extension, but of course for a permanent ceasefire. You've been following these diplomatic talks closely. How far are we from seeing these hostilities completely stop, where talks are being held for a lasting peace?
I think we're getting closer, but we're not yet there. What I predict is that even if Netanyahu were to insist on re-engaging in the war in Gaza, the likelihood is that the mood in which he will conduct his war would be much more moderated. I think a very important message has been delivered to him from the United States about the need to avoid the scale of civilian casualties that he has resulted in over the last few weeks. You know, he went in on the assumption that Hamas headquarters is under a Shifa hospital, and that was proven to be wrong. He made a lot of wrong assumptions in his war. He's resulted in the murder or killing of 15,000 civilians. And I think the U.S. itself is coming under pressure, both domestically, within its own administration, within the Congress, and internationally. As you have witnessed over the last few days, the EU is now divided on the issue. The Congress, some members of the Senate are calling for conditionality on any further aid to Israel, and that the $14 billion that the United States is now, or the administration is trying to push through, should not be given to Israel without conditions on what and how American-made weapons can be used. And this is all of this is the result of Israel, I think, taking the United States green light for granted.
Right.
And as you witnessed, they use some of the weapons, some of the bombs that have never been used before, even by the Americans in Iraq, in the worst of Iraq war or Afghanistan.
Right.
And that, I think, for some American policymakers is unacceptable.
Right. We did hear testimonies from doctors that were working in Gaza talk about the kind of weapons that have been used across the strip, and that they're not able to identify the kind of weaponry that have caused the wounds on the patients that they received there. Now, there are various scenarios of post-war order in Gaza and the occupied territories, both regarding the political structure of the PA and the demilitarization of those areas. Hamas is being viewed quite differently within Gaza compared to how they're viewed in the occupied West Bank, for example. There's a lot of factors at play here, but what do you think would be the most viable way forward for peace in the region?
I think what is badly needed now is to protect the Palestinian people. The status quo cannot continue as it is. We cannot also wait until the Palestinian Authority is reformed and or Hamas is becoming acceptable to the international community in order to start to bring normalcy back to the Palestinian people. There's 2.2 million individuals, families who are trapped in Gaza, cannot continue to pay the price for the failure of the international community and or the price of the, those who've been victimized by the Europeans back in the Second World War. Something has got to change in the way the Palestinian issue is approached. And my personal view is that they should be put under active protection. I mean, in effect, by being 70% of them are mostly refugees, they should have been protected by the UN, but that protection does not have any force to enforce it, any power to enforce it. I think time has come to treat maybe the Gaza Strip similar to what the international community did with Kosovo in 1999, that it will introduce a real system of protection, maybe with some UN leadership, but also includes a council of Palestinian individuals that are agreeable to the Palestinian people from all walks of politics. And this is not impossible to do relatively quickly, and then give it 2 or 3 years time to help people rebuild, adjust, and meanwhile aim for the ultimate goal. And the ultimate goal has got to be a two-state solution. Anything short of that, I think, will continue to produce violence in the region. And this is something that is probably by now understood by many Israelis, and particularly after this war, it has reminded all Israelis of the fact that Israel is a foreign body that has been planted in this region, and the best chance for it to survive and coexist is to accept the Palestinians as a neighboring state.
Indeed. The director of the Global Institute for Strategic Research at Hamad Bin Khalifa University, Sultan Barakat, thank you so much for being with us here on the NewsHour.